Welcome to Taking Stock. I'm Amanda Lang. Coming up on the show, finding the missing middle class in Canada and the calm before the tariff storm, how to plan for the unknown. Plus, forget dry January. More and more Canadians are giving up booze. So where does that leave the industry? That's all ahead. First, for the week that was in business, it's time for the briefs. A flurry of first-day executive orders from Donald Trump notably did not include new tariffs for Canada or anyone else, though the president promises them by February 1st. He did issue an American First trade policy to establish a new Department of External Revenue, collecting tariffs, of course. And he killed U.S. involvement in the Paris climate targets, as well as the global minimum corporate tax. Trump also declared a national energy emergency, vowing to clear the regulatory path for more oil and gas drilling. As Canada braces for what may be ahead, retaliatory measures being pondered, including one that might really hurt. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said that in the event of tariffs are laid on, he would order the liquor stores of Ontario to remove all U.S. products from the shelves. As one of the biggest single purchasers in the world, that might get some attention. Prices in Canada cooled by more than expected in December, but for the expected reason. The GST cut sent costs lower, so inflation was just 1.8%, as prices for toys declined 7% and alcohol 4%. The drop is expected to be a one-off, but the overall picture remains one of muted inflation in Canada. One place inflation may well remain is for food, and this week, Canada's largest grocer warned some prices beyond its control are rising. Loblaw said that products like meat, coffee, and cocoa will all have an impact on its ability to keep costs in line as producers charge the retailers more. Netflix reported strong subscriber growth in its recent quarter, with 18.9 million new users in the last 3 months of the year alone. It took advantage of the strength to raise prices. Its base subscription will climb $2 to $7.99 a month, while the premium ad-free plan will climb to $23.99. Netflix defended the increase as a necessary move to support expensive content. Canada's biggest banks have now joined their U.S. peers and quit the UN-backed Net Zero Banking Alliance. American bank CEOs cited the changing political climate as a reason to ditch the Climate Alliance. And those are your business briefs. When it comes to questions of affordability in Canada, a lot of the numbers seem to be pointing in a more positive direction. So here's a look by the numbers. Since housing is one of the biggest measures of affordability, the situation has improved when it comes to incomes relative to house prices. The ratio peaked back in 2022 when the average home divided by median income was 9.6. By last spring, it had dropped to 7.7 times, partly as incomes caught up. Wage growth has, in fact, occurred. In October of 2024, weekly earnings rose an average of 5.3% in Canada across all sectors. That's the fastest pace since 2021. And while it's still high at 174.4% by October of last year, household debt to income is improving slightly, down from the peak debt levels of the fall of 2022. Meanwhile, inflation is tame in Canada at 1.8% at the end of last year. It's now spent a full year at the central bank's target range, between 1% and 3%. But a big chunk of Canadians, 45%, according to StatsCan, are worried about their housing. And more than 1 in 5 households live in unaffordable housing, defined as spending more than 30% of your income on housing costs. How old you are matters when it comes to how you feel. In the 2024 World Happiness Report, older Canadians ranked Canada 8th best in the world. Those under 30 put us at 58th. It's data points like those, that happiness score, that propelled the launch of The Missing Middle, a new organization that aims to better understand the plight of Canadians who are still clinging to that dream of a middle-class existence. Mike Moffatt is executive in residence at the Smart Prosperity Institute. Thanks for being with us, Mike.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So you have launched this Missing Middle think tank. What do you hope to do with it? What's the goal of it?
Well, I think it's twofold. That first, I think we need to understand the situation that young urban middle class families are facing. I think it's poorly understood, some of the cost challenges that they're facing. But the second part is finding solutions, finding policy solutions to make housing more affordable, to increase those wages that you spoke about earlier, to reduce other costs of living, to bring wages and cost of living back in line and, give middle class families an opportunity to be able to afford a home. For so many of them, they've given up on the dream of home ownership, and I think that's a problem.
One of the issues, of course, we have when we talk about the middle class, and politicians love to talk about the middle class, Mike, is who we're talking about. Because by the data, the median income, if we look at that, it's actually much lower than a lot of people who would consider themselves middle class. How are you going to define this term for the purposes of your work?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But basically what we're doing is excluding the sort of bottom 20% of family income, saying, those are kind of low income individuals and they kind of need different levels of support. And we're excluding the top 10%. So if you earn more than about $220,000 as a family, we're not at that point not considering you middle class. But it's everyone else in between, that sort of anywhere from $50,000 to $220,000 a year. And that, that stretches a large swath of people who have, somewhat different challenges. Mm-hmm. But even today in the city of Toronto, you could have a couple that's earning $180,000, $190,000 a year and still struggling to find somewhere to live.
Yeah. And so I guess the big question will be how much housing takes up the work that you're doing and how central it is to this question of sort of achieving what will feel like a good life.
Yeah, I think it is going to be probably about 70 to 80% of what we look at least in 2025, because if you don't get housing right, nothing else is right. But that can't be the only thing we look at. We need to look at incomes, how to increase productivity and increase wages. We need to look at other costs of living for those families, such as daycare. So it's not just a housing issue, but if you don't have housing right, then, nothing else really matters at that point.
And of course, we've heard a lot of talk about what to do about housing and how to improve affordability. Building more houses would be a good start. And yet we don't seem to see housing starts data that back up the fact that we're doing it. What would you like to see happen?
Well, and it's largely an Ontario problem that over the last year, the rest of Canada had 18,000 or so extra housing starts, and Ontario had 18,000 fewer, so it kind of netted out the same. I think in Ontario, we need to look at, regulations, being able to get homes, shovels in the ground faster, so things like zoning and building code and so on. One of the big problems we have in Ontario is high housing construction taxes, including development charges. Mm-hmm. So even on a modest two-bedroom apartment in downtown Toronto, you're looking at housing taxes of over $150,000 a unit. There's no way to make housing affordable for middle-class families if they're paying just that much in City of Toronto taxes.
All right, Mike, we've got to leave it there. Great to have you with us.
No, thank you for having me.
Mike Moffatt is executive in resident at the Smart Prosperity Institute. Still ahead, a reprieve from day one tariffs by the U.S. gives Canada time to regroup. Stay with us.